Hello. In this video we're going to create a new Android project and build a simple layout with a button and the text view. Start of course by clicking Start a New Android Product. Start with giving it a name. I'll call this Hello World Click. The company domain is important. If you own a URL, that's what you're going to want to put there. If you don't own a URL, you can just put your name.com or name.edu. It won't matter until you actually go to publish it. For testing, for learning purposes, you can put anything you want there. I'm leaving it as my name, and I'll hit next. Choice now is what type of app you're going to build. Phone and tablet are the most common. API 16, as it says here, is approximately 95% of devices in the world. If you hit the drop, you can pick newer, older. You can all the way go back to the beginning of time if you'd like. I don't recommend it, but you can. I'm going to stick with 16 because that will support everything I own and just about probably what you own as well. I'm going to hit next. You have a variety of choices. Many of these are wizards that walk you through. Google Maps activities, clearly what that is. Navigation drawer is a nice way to create a side-scrolling menu. I'm going to create a basic activity. It's going to ask for the activity name. Activity is the Android equivalent of a Windows form. If you have one activity, main activity is fine. When you start to have multiple, you can have multiple activities. Fragments are like pieces of activity. That's a little more advanced. I'm going to leave it as main activity and hit finish. You'll notice on the right that I already have my emulator running. That'll just save me time when the project starts. Depending on the speed of your system, this can take several minutes. I'm going to pause while this loads. And I'm back. You can tell when it's done whenever your screen loads up what looks like a phone. You have XML in the center of the screen. On the left hand side you have the project description. I'm going to start with the screen itself. This is your Android device. It already writes Hello World for you. If I select that, you'll notice that it selects as well in the XML. You are capable of building Android applications either with the GUI or just in the XML. In reality, you do a little bit of both. You do a lot of GUI editing, and then when things just don't quite work right, you jump over to the XML and you edit it from there. If you absolutely hate XML, click Design down here. You get yourself a toolbox with some clearly named widgets. A widget is Android's version of a control. If you've played with Java and JSwing, the plain text view is a lot like the JText box. The buttons are like JButtons. If you've been in Visual Studio, a button is a button. They call them widgets here. It's their prerogative. I'm going to get rid of the Hello World widget because I don't like that one. I click on it, press delete, it goes away. If I go to my text option, it's gone. I'm going to pull over a button. I'm going to drag it onto the screen. I'm using a relative layout here, which means my objects will appear on the screen roughly where I put them. Sometimes Android helps you and moves things around and resizes stuff. For now, just deal with it, and as you get better at this, you'll learn how to move things, use different layouts, build your own custom layouts. You will be able to design anything that you wish, just it takes time. If you're Visual Studio or NetBeans or an Eclipse user, you're used to properties of objects. The ones that are bold are typically the more common ones. I'm going to start with ID, that is the name. Give it a simple name like click button. Any naming context you want. Some programmers use btn click, others use click underscore button. Use whatever you're comfortable with as long as it makes sense. You chose the right name. There's a text property. Whatever's in the text property is what's visible to the user. I'm going to channel my inner Alice in Wonderland here and say click me. And you see how the button resized itself. If you hate that, you can force the size. By default, the gravity, which is the center of the text, will be or the text will be centered. That is, of course, changeable. Color is changeable. Font is changeable. Anything you want to change that you can think about, you can change. So I've got a text property. I have an ID property. I'm going to pull over a large text widget because I'm old and blind and I like the big text. Again, I'm going to make it as wide as the screen. And I'm going to give this a name. I call it TXT Welcome. Oh, great. I'm also going to delete the text property so that nothing's there whenever the program starts. Now, that is simple GUI animation or GUI editing. If you've done any type of programming in the past where you build a GUI screen, this is nothing exceptionally new. Different names, different objects, different properties, but it's the same basic concept. I want to now take a couple minutes to look at the Android Studio Object Explorer. Under Layout, this is where you find your activities. Notice it's buried under Res. These folders have uses. Under the drawable folders, where we're going to put your icons, like the startup icon, images in the screen. Values are where strings will live, colors will live, different styles you pick will live. You notice that everything is an XML document, which means it's easy to edit. The Xml Editor here is very helpful. It will not let you make a mistake. Well, you can still make a mistake, but it'll help you to not make a mistake. Menu is the menu. Currently our main menu is blank. You will be able to edit that later on. Just, with everything, be patient with Java and be patient with Android. You'll get there. Up under the Java folder, we have a number of entries. The name of my project was Hello World Click. Here's my name, my domain. I expand down and get the main activity. When we go to write the Java code, that's where we'll put the code, is inside of main activity. The rest of the screen, some of it's obvious, like there's the run button. I have my Android managers, SDK managers. If you can read the screen, you can usually figure this project out. Next, we're going to make this project do something. There are a variety of ways to do what I'm about to do. Every programmer I know programs this a little bit differently. I like to go as a Visual Studio and a Java NetBeans example and find the on-click event for this button. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Click Button. Remember that and hang on to it for later. It's going to yell at me and tell me I'm doing something wrong, which I currently am. The reason I'm doing something wrong is I don't have any code for this thing yet. I'm going to have to go create the code. While I'm here, I'll take a moment and revisit my names. I've got Click Button, and I have Text Welcome because I need them in my Java code. I'm going to go over to my Solution Explorer. I'm going to open up main activity and go to the Java code. Much of this stuff is created for us, like this floating action button. That's the menu. If you've taken a Java class before, actually you have to have taken a Java class before, you recognize the imports, you recognize an extends here. This is your standard inheritance in Java. We're going to make our buttons respond. First thing I need to do is I need to create variables for these. And like most class variables, I need to use the type. Now, TextView is angry at me. It shows me why it's angry at me. It's angry at me because I did not import Android.widget.textview. So I'm going to add this to my imports up here. Now it's no longer angry at me. This object will be linked to the text view on the activity. This is something Android does differently than everybody else. You have to explicitly create a variable for every on-screen object. They do this to save a little memory. You may have on-screen objects that you don't mess with in code. Android decided to not make those have variables in memory. I'm going to do the same thing for my button. I tend to use different names in my code than the names I created for my on-screen objects. I do that for my own sanity. Some of the students and developers I know do that differently. Now again, it's yelling at me for a button. Again, it tells me I need to import this, but it also gives me this little keystroke. I hold Alt-Enter on top of it, just like it told me, it automatically imported Andrew Widget button for you. Most IDEs have these types of helpers. This is just Java or Android's way of doing it. Alright, so I have created these objects. I now need to link them to the on-screen objects. We're going to do that in onCreate. OnCreate is called whenever this Android app is opened and the activity is created. So it's like a constructor. You notice it extends off of app compat activity. It calls a super constructor there. It sets a number of objects here. We won't use any of these today, but I will create these two objects. Welcome text is my local variable. I'm going to need to typecast this into a text view because that's what it is, and that's what I'm going to read from the screen. And now I need to get it off the screen. I'm going to use the built-in method of find view by ID, and what this wants is an integer ID for the object. You can learn all the object numbers, but it's much easier to use the drops. R refers to the current activity. You see R popping up all over the place. R.layout, R.id.fab. R is your current resource. Do the same thing for the button here. It's a button, so I typecast a button. If you don't remember to typecast, Android Studio will definitely yell at you. If you're wondering how I'm getting that to appear so quickly, it's Control Spacebar and it fills in. Alright, so these create my objects. I'm going to do a quick save just to make sure that nothing goes away. As many objects I want to code on screen, I have to do this. I have to instantiate them here and link them to the on-screen objects there by finding their view ID. I now need to create the click events for my button. If you recall, I went Visual Studio on you and found the on-click events and gave it a name called clicked button. The name here doesn't matter. As long as you name it something that makes sense to you and to somebody that might follow you, you're doing it right. I'm now going to create the event for this. There are many ways to do this. Some developers will implement action listener up here after the main activity and then respond to action performed down here. I'm going to just simply create a method. I'm not more right than other people. It's just how I've always done it. Okay. So this is the exact same name that I put on my object for the on-click. I'm going to write my code here. Now it's basic Java. Use the setText method. And put what you want there. In future coding, you will learn how to work with the strings XML file, and in there you can put pre-designed strings, which is a really good idea, especially if you're going to create a regionalized or nationalized version of your code. But for these purposes, I'm just going to write the string variable here. It is better to learn the strings XML, but I'll do that in a later date. My program should be good. I'm going to run this thing. I'm going to click this green triangle to run, and it's going to ask me what I want to run it on. This is my actual phone. I prefer to run them on my phone, but it's really hard for me to show the video for that. So this Nexus S is an emulator that I built. It's already up and running, so that'll take a little bit of time away from this. If your emulator isn't running like this guy, and I already hit OK, it would take a couple minutes for it to start. Depending on your machine and if you've installed the correct hacksums and virtualization support, that could be 5 minutes to 25 minutes. I'm going to hit OK, launched on my built-in emulator. And I brought up the emulator so you can watch what occurs. You notice the Gradle is running here. Gradle is their built-in project manager. It's helping to build this project. You also notice that it's yelling me down here, string literal and set text cannot be translated. Use resources instead. What they're referring to is using strings XML. The first run takes a while, so I'm going to pause out while this is building. That only took about 30 seconds. It's clear when it works. Your application loads up. Your button's there. When I hit click me, it runs. If you've done something wrong, you will get errors down in this screen. Logcat is where you find your mistakes. The downside is this becomes a large amount of text, especially if you're connecting to a live device. It almost looks like there's an infinite loop just generating random words. The logcat will be very noticeable. It'll be red error text. You'll have to click on it. I will do that in a later video. So for now, we see it worked. The click me worked. And that's it. Well, thank you very much.